A Living Man Declared Dead and Other Chapters was produced over a 4-year period in which I traveled around the world documenting bloodlines, 18 bloodlines, and their related stories. And the work is broken down into 18 chapters, and it looks at issues surrounding fate and whether one's fate is determined by chance, blood, or circumstance. And in each of the 18 chapters, you can see the external forces of governance, territory, religion, power, colliding with the internal forces of psychological or physical inheritance. Each chapter is divided into 3 segments. And the first segment is a portrait panel in which I systematically order the members of a given bloodline. And those members that could not be present are represented through empty portraits. And the reasons for the absences are given in the text panel, in which I write the narrative at stake. And it also includes census-like information about each individual I photographed. So their name, their date of birth, where they're living, what their occupation is. And then there are also captions which correspond to the third panel, which is a footnote panel, in which I present images that are fragments of the story at stake, more abstractions, beginnings of other stories, and in that panel I allow a certain chaos to exist. Chapter 1 in the project, which is the chapter from which the title was drawn, A Living Man Declared Dead, and other chapters, it refers to a bloodline in which 3 members of the bloodline are listed in the local village registry in Uttar Pradesh, India, as legally dead. They don't exist according to official paperwork. And this was done to interrupt the hereditary transfer of land and allow other family members to seize their land. And for me as a photographer, it was particularly interesting to be photographing people who technically don't exist. In chapter 6, I documented 3 bloodlines of test rabbits that were bred at a research facility in Queensland, Australia. And this research facility is studying these bloodlines to determine if the virulence of a newly developed disease is powerful enough to kill all of them. This was done because in 1859, a European man brought over 24 European rabbits to his estate in Victoria for sporting purposes. And rabbits are such prolific breeders that the population exploded within a very short period of time. And the Australian government has consequently started introducing lethal diseases into the rabbit population to control population growth. In chapter 2, I look at the descendants of Arthur Rupin, who was sent by the Zionist organization to Palestine in 1907 to investigate possibilities for Jewish settlement. And in this work, I'm interested in looking at the migratory patterns of his descendants as well. Did they remain in Israel? Did they spread out to different countries? Are they still working to further the state? And I also, in the footnote panel, spent a lot of time at the Central Zionist Archives in Jerusalem and looking at kind of the line of the history of that state and the paperwork that corresponds to its establishment. And in the footnote panel, you see there's a report and 2 maps that were done by the Zionist organization to look at British East Africa, specifically Uganda, as the potential site for Jewish settlement, which is just an interesting thing to imagine if Israel were in Uganda. The exhibition design is meant to refer to an archive, and we constructed these these stacks in which the information of the work is embedded. The works are literally embedded into the wall. We've cut out these holes that they're placed into. And you can't see much of the work upon entering into the building. You have to really go into the stacks and discover the work in more seclusion. So you have this very public space that has been converted into something more private on the inside. It has a very austere and ordered and rigid appearance, which is corresponding to Mies and also to the work itself. In many ways, the collective chapters, the 18 chapters together, don't amount to some overriding idea. It is an exploration of chaos in many ways. And it creates an archive, but archives often exist because something can't be articulated. So in many ways, if anything were to be established, it's in the gaps between all of this information that I present. It's in the spaces between that something is conveyed.